Welcome to She Considers a Field podcast with coach, encourager, and fellow entrepreneur and homeschooling mama of four, Anna McLaughlin. As a homeschooling entrepreneur, you are uniquely positioned to impact the kingdom of God both deep through your investment in your children and wide through your business. And yet guilt, frustration, and overwhelm can hold you back from all that God has for you. Come with me on a journey to walk in deeper peace, purpose, and joy, because God has given you a legacy to build, and I'm here to help you enjoy the ride. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of She Considers a Field podcast, where we are talking with the amazing Andrea Johnson. Just wait for this conversation. It's going to light you up. Andrea Johnson empowers executives and founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence so they can make a positive impact on their lives, organizations, and communities. Uncovering and understanding the significance of her core values became the key to the process that allows her clients to become impactful leaders. Her passion is equipping female leaders to define a new culture by trusting their own ability to think critically, create imaginatively, and lead effectively. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of She Considers a Field, and I have a treat for you. Introducing Andrea Johnson, transformational leadership coach. She is going to spill all the juice on core values, on our personalities, and how that impacts our life, our work, our motherhood, our homeschool journey, and so much more. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is an interview that I have very much been looking forward to.
Oh, me too. Me too. You guys, this is just a lesson to ask for what you want. I heard Andrea on another podcast. She came on and she did a training in a coaching program that I'm a part of, and I was like, I want to talk to her more, but we're new. This podcast is small. And you know what I did? I just asked, and she said I would be delighted. So, lesson learned, and here we are reaping all the benefits. Okay. So, Andrea, start me off. Let's take just a second. Lead me through this path that you've been on. You are a pastor's wife. You've been in ministry. You've done John Maxwell leadership certification coaching. I know you know the term better than I do. Where are you now? What can you bring us into in the course of this conversation we're about to have?
Well, I call myself a transformational leadership coach. And I do that because I like to take people from being disempowered to being impactful. And by
Mm.
disempowered, I mean not having obviously not having the impact you want, but a lot of times it's responsibility without authority. It's if you're if you're entrepreneur, then it may be you're kind of spinning your wheels. You're not quite sure the direction you want to go. When I first started my entrepreneurship journey, I know I've been through 4 or 5 iterations, right? So anybody who's done that understands. But if you're still working for someone else, it may be the simple fact that you like I got a promotion with no raise and I was frustrated. I was bored, and I was so bored. I could literally
Mm.
do my job with 2 hands tied behind my back in 2 days a week. And yet I couldn't get a promotion and I couldn't get a raise. And, those kinds of things leave us feeling very unfulfilled. They leave us feeling like there's something else that I could be putting on the table. And so it may be that people in your audience who are already in the entrepreneurship journey, or maybe they've decided to homeschool, those kinds of things are pretty big life choices. And it may be that they've taken that first step, but they don't quite know where to go with all the rest of it. And when I work with entrepreneurs, I find these are the people who have used whatever skills they had, like they've brought them into their own entrepreneurship journey. And they've gotten to a level, but they can't get past that because they've used external rules or principles, and which is all great, right? We all have systems that we employ from someone else that maybe we got from a coach. But if we don't know who we are, if we don't know how to show up as us, John Maxwell calls it the law of the ladder, or the law of the lid, excuse me. The ladder is when you can't go any higher than your character, right? We're not going to talk
Mhm.
about character. We might, but the law of the lid is basically you can only go as high as you understand. If your awareness
Mm.
doesn't, yeah, if you don't have the awareness of where you need to be, you can't go there. So my work is in helping people start from the inside, understand your core values, understand how God created you, who he created you to be. My favorite Bible verse is Ephesians 2:10. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works that he designated for us long ago. If you go to the New Living Translation, it's
Mhm.
really a beautiful
Oh,
way
that
to
is beautiful.
state it. And that was a very freeing verse for me. That was, stumbling upon that because I'm a missionary kid. I'm a pastor's
Yeah.
kid first, missionary kid. I mean, my dad was in school when I was born, and then going to seminary, meeting my husband, and then being a pastor's wife, and all of that. I've read the Bible a lot.
Yes.
And I am not somebody who is biblically illiterate, but stumbling across that and reading it again for what felt like the first time and being able to
Mm.
see that and say, oh, at the end of this Ephesians 2 passage, there's all this beautiful stuff. And like, wait a minute, that one verse was like God telling me, I designed you specifically to be exactly who you are. And
Mm.
if you don't show up like that, Andrea, people are going to miss out. And so I would like to say that to everybody listening. And that is my big message, is that you need to show up as you.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I told you guys. So good.
But these are hard won
Mhm.
lessons,
Right,
though. I
right.
mean, I wish I'd learned these things when I was 30. I would have,
I know.
but that's okay. That's part of our journey, right? It's
That's
like,
right.
and if we're not willing to give back what we've learned, that's part of the process as well. It's like
That's
turning
right.
around and offering that to the next person behind you.
That's right. Now, talk to me about this because I think this is a real struggle for women in the church especially. The idea of show up as who you are. I feel like the word that comes to mind is that, "Oh, that feels indulgent." That feels like it bends into that, like, "Oh, there's this, there's the, distorted side of that that's like, I'm just keeping it real, and we're, like, sinning all over everybody." But what you're talking about is very different. Can you help us, those of us who are sitting there going, "But I need to be nice, but I need to do what's expected of me, but I need to be a helper," when we're kind of under that shroud, what's gonna help us give ourselves permission to be free of that and step into that authenticity that's actually God ordained?
Yeah, this is the part that makes me a little unpopular with certain sectors. I mean, um,
Me too, it's
right?
why I
I
like
mean,
you.
I mean, I think that there's a connection that you and I have that's a little deeper than maybe comes across, but, I played the good girl role for 50 plus years, and, I realized that was part of my journey in becoming a Maxwell coach and a DISC consultant and becoming self-employed was I watched my mother at the age of 50, when I was 50, excuse me, my mother was 70, 74, 75. We lost her to breast cancer in
Mm,
2017. So that
I'm
was 7 years
sorry.
ago. And I realized at the time I had an 8-year-old adopted son. My husband's a small church pastor, and I was working for your alma mater, which is a great university,
I know it,
University of
yes,
Virginia.
yes.
But I knew that's not where I needed to be. And I didn't want my next 50 years, hopefully, to
Mhm.
be the same because I knew that there were too many areas of my life where I wasn't being me. Some of
Mm.
it was in my workplace, a lot of it was in the church. My mother told me when I was younger, I went to seminary thinking I was going to be a missionary because I didn't want to be a pastor's wife, that's for sure. And my mother told me, early on, don't be a pastor's wife. It's like the hardest work in the world.
Yeah.
And 'cause she was a pastor's wife until they went on the mission field. And then I think she realized, yeah, there's freedom on the mission field until you come back to the States. And then
Mm.
so I have been advocating for and been through what I don't even know that I wanna call it deconstruction anymore. I call it pruning, I call it growing, I call it understanding and having awareness that we as women have been, and I walk through my ABCs and a lot of things, my assumptions, beliefs, and conditioning. We as
Mm.
women have been conditioned in certain ways by society, and evangelical Christianity has influenced that a lot. But at the same time, there are things that evangelical Christianity doesn't realize they have taken on from society and made their own. And part of that is the woman's place. And
Mm.
my mother was an extremely intelligent woman. After it took her 14 different schools to graduate from college because she met my dad the first day of 10th grade and married him like 3 years later, 4 years later,
Wow.
right out of high school, like when she was 19. And so she worked to put him through school. She put him through college, she put him through seminary, and then on the mission field, she finally graduated after going to 14 different schools. And
Wow.
she graduated cum laude from the University of Maryland
Oh,
overseas. So through
wow.
the armed forces. And so she's smart. And she was, if anybody listening is affiliated with civil service or the military, she was a GS-14, which is on the same level as civil servant as a colonel. And she worked for the American Red Cross in Korea, and she handled all of the volunteers for Asia and the Pacific. And she won the Clara Barton Award and went to Geneva to the International Red Cross. I mean, smart, capable woman. We had a mission compound when I left in 84. When I know I'm old, I'm 57. So when I graduated from high school, they tore down the 6 or 7 houses we had. They built 16 townhomes, and she was the project manager, right?
Wow.
And then she came back to the States and took a secretary job.
No.
I promise. I mean, she was a
Wow.
marketing director. At first, she was a marketing person for a, we lived in a, if you're familiar with Richmond, we lived in Midlothian and Brandermill, which is this golf community. And so she worked as the marketing director at the country club, but she didn't really like it. So she went to work for the International Mission Board in Richmond, and she was literally secretary until she retired. And she could have done, I mean, she between her and God, she reconciled that. But when I looked at other women in ministry, I knew I was never going to be that person. I knew that I was not, I knew I wanted to work outside. I mean, I tried.
Yeah.
I tried
Right.
to be a stay-home mom. I hated it. I
Yeah.
tried to do the pastor wifey thing. It's like, this is not good. I mean, it just because when we talk about DISC, I'm an ICD, which we can talk about DISC in a little while, but the
Mhm.
definition of that's the title for the ICD is a leader. And in evangelical circles, women are not necessarily leaders. And so I was constantly at war from like day one with my own who I am versus who I think I'm supposed to be.
Mm.
And I'm also an Enneagram 6. So I doubled down. I wanted to make sure that I was loyal to everybody and make sure I conformed. And it just was so much. And in college, I remember a music minister's wife. And back then, this was a big deal. This was his second wife. And that was huge. I don't remember if she was divorced, but I remember her saying to me, because I was in school and taking some music classes. And I remember her saying to me, Andrea, you don't have to be like everybody else. I am not a typical music minister's wife. And that really stuck with me, even when I married my husband, knowing that he was a youth minister at the time and that he wanted to be a pastor. I said, I can't be the typical pastor's wife. I don't play the piano, number one. My mother said,
Yes.
they make you play the piano. And I'm like, well, they're out of luck because they don't play the piano. And I mean, I can like plunk out a tune, but I don't play the piano. And until the last 7 or 8 years, I've started teaching, which is definitely a gift and a calling. But until then, I just it's like administrative stuff. So that means I got to boss you around, right? It's like I need to be in charge of something, or
Mhm.
so it's been a long road. It has not been easy. I've literally had deacons sit me down in my husband's office and say, "We're going to ask the church fire your husband. It's because of you."
Oh.
And so being every time, and even right now, this week, we're going through some stuff in my small church where I don't think it's fully me, but the old messages keep coming up. I
Mhm.
mean, before we got on this, I said, I asked my husband to pray for me because I said, I'm still struggling with this situation. And the voices inside my head tell me, and this is who we are, right? That this could happen again. They could ask.
Mhm.
And that didn't happen. It ended up splitting the church, and there was a split that was going to happen in the church that had nothing to do with us. It was happening before we got there. But these are the kinds of things every time I feel like I show up as myself
Mhm.
and be a strong woman and have an opinion, for crying out loud, like
Mm.
as if it's like a capital offense,
Yes.
um, and say what I think, and God forbid, say I don't actually agree with that theological doctrine, or like that
Mhm.
actually I don't see that in scripture anywhere. If you want to believe that, that's completely up to you. It's just I'm not going to be on that train with you. I just need you to know
Mhm.
that. And it just is amazing to me how much that still comes up. because this is
Mhm.
30 years. I mean, we just had our 29th wedding anniversary. And so we dated for almost a year.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And he was a youth minister. So I need to be able to say that part and know that this is a human tendency. This is a conditioning that we have as women to fill a specific role, to be a certain type.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that women who fill that role are capitulating or anything. I'm just saying there's plenty of us out there that do not meet that stereotype.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
as long as we are learning how to be faithful in who he called us to be, and learning how to do it with grace, and learning how to do it without judgment, and learning how to do it with like I said, when we kind of before we started praying, it's like everything to the glory of God, everything
Yes.
to the glory of God. I mean,
Yes.
man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. So
Yes.
whatever I do, it's like that's the goal. And so navigating those things are hard.
But it's the work, right?
It's work. And when you
So
know yourself, it's easier to do that.
that's right. Okay, so talk to my people who are at this point where they're like, I've been frustrated, I've been discouraged, I'm at those ceilings, that lid. I keep hitting up against the lid, and I'm willing to crack the door and go, maybe part of why I've been so stuck is because I have not owned my identity. I've not been willing to walk in my core values.
Yeah.
Maybe it's actually not that I'm wrong, but that I've been co-signing onto something that's actually not who I really am. Okay, so
Right.
they're willing to take that step. What's the first step? What do they do?
Well, I love your word cosign, because what I talk about is moving away from imitating other people's principles and priorities to understanding your own so that you can have sustainable leadership. And
Mm,
it's not just, maybe you don't want to be a leader, or you think you don't want to be a leader, but you are a leader. You are a leader. You lead the person that you see in the mirror. You lead any small people that are in your house. You
yes.
lead your spouse. You lead in your work. You lead everywhere. And the very first step is being willing to say, all right, what's in here? What
Mm,
is important to me? And the word you used earlier was indulgent. That does feel
mm,
indulgent. The reality is you were made in his image and you are
yes.
just as important as anybody else. And it's time for you to see what's in there and to see how he created you to show up.
And I would say, and tell me if this aligns with kind of your messaging. One of the things that we talk about on this podcast a lot is actually when we are not acknowledging who we really are, we're actually in a form of idolatry because we're honoring other people's opinions over, and I was literally praying about this today because I was in it, right? I was in it. Some
Yeah.
messaging that I heard 8 months ago was still coming back around, and the Lord was like, "You're letting other people define what I want from you
Hmm.
instead of me." And so we actually are suppressing our ministry and our impact for his kingdom when we don't
Right.
do this work that you're talking about. Would you have anything to add to that, or is that in alignment with kind of your mission as well?
That's truly in alignment. And because of some of my experiences, I don't always use spiritual language like that. So if
Yeah.
anybody is not resonating 100% with that kind of spiritual language, I would say instead of operating by somebody else's rules, you need to actually live by the rules that are the guidelines that have been put in you from the very beginning. It's like your own DOS or your own operating system. It's like he
Mhm.
made you to do, like I said, Ephesians 2:10, to do specific things. What are the things? And if you don't, I use this example too. If you don't bring the dish that you're supposed to bring to the holiday meal, something's missing from the table.
Yes.
And so it is, yes, I think a form of selfishness and self-preservation sometimes. So
Oh,
it
yes,
doesn't it
yes.
doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be pure. We don't want to see it as selfishness because we think of that as being almost narcissistic. But a lot of
Mhm,
times, selfishness really is more of a self preservation because we don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be kicked out of the community. We want to belong. We want to make
mhm,
sure that we are integrated and that, especially, we have the bow tied on top and it's like we got it all squared away. And we have to leave those kinds of things behind. We
mhm.
have to understand that he's really called us to this wild adventure. And if you're willing to be an entrepreneur and a homeschooler, you're on a wild adventure anyway. So
You are.
you might as well just embrace it.
Just go for it. Okay, so now this one I am so curious about. we're willing to do the work. Okay, I'm willing to see who I really am. I'm willing to open this door. Do you have any suggestions? Because most of my people are married with children in the home. And
Mhm.
so we've got this kind of ready-made container that's already set up with a certain assumption of here's how you show up, here's how I show up, here's how the kids show up. When we're changing, that disrupts the equilibrium. Do you
Mhm.
have any suggestions for how to walk that out well, where while we're already in these solid core relationships?
Yeah, my husband and I went to some counseling when we were living in Baltimore, and it was this great Christian counselor. And one of the things he said, he did what we call family dynamic counseling and or family systems. And the
Ooh.
when you were started talking, I'm like, oh, this is exactly what he was talking about. So he said, if you're all players on a stage, and I did some musical theater growing up, so it resonated
Mhm.
with me. But if you're all players on a stage and somebody exits stage right that has a line, the rest of the group is going, "Hey, wait, what?"
Yes.
So this is something that, people who are in 12-step program also face, like, if they're changing, everybody's already got their roles established, so that's a very
Mhm.
negative way to look at it, and I love the way you've put it this way, it's a very positive way to look at it. So a couple of things I would say principles are the more adults you can have, the more, like, decision makers you can have on board with the changes, the
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
number 1. Um, and if not, and it's just you, expect it to be slow and expect there to be bumps in the road and expect
Mhm.
absolutely everyone to say, "What are you doing?" Right? Because it's just going to happen that way.
Sure.
And so, one of the benefits of we did not adopt our son until we were 14 years into our marriage, and that's a whole other story. But one of the benefits of that is that we had already worked out a lot of this stuff before he came along, which is great because he's his own thing. Um,
Mhm.
but that means that we already had a little bit of that going, and then we had the family dynamic to figure out. So, first of all, if you can have all the adults on board, or if you have teenagers in the house, appeal to them as well.
Mhm.
And the way you do that is to seek to understand them first. I'm just going to go straight to Stephen Covey. If you seek to
Ooh.
understand them first, and then
Mhm.
share. A lot of times when I work with this happens in the workplace as well. Like if you have a team and you're making some changes, the rest of the team is going to look at you as well and say, hang on. And one of the things that I do is I share with people, or I ask people to share the do's and don'ts of their personality, like communication type, the do's and don'ts of this is my core value. And I, I want to honor this and I want to honor it in you. And I want to make sure that we live together in harmony. And I want to be as real as possible. But I need you to understand this is something that's important to me. And I've always just reacted in anger. So from now on, I'm going to react with remember that is a core value of mine, right? It's like
Mhm.
start being super honest, especially in those relationships with the little people, because little people have a BS-o-meter that is really, really, really intensely strong.
Yes.
They know when you're making it up. And so one of the things that we started doing early on was, and I make mistakes all the time because we had to learn a whole new parenting style with my son. I
Mhm.
apologize. I I even will stop in the middle of me freaking out about something and say, "Hold up, I need a second. I'm freaking out here." He's like, "Yeah, I can see that." And I'm like, "I know, but here's the deal. I need help working through this. Can you help me?" Right? Ask for their help, right? It's like
Oh.
the more you treat them with sometimes they're too young to do that, but still, if the more you treat them with the respect that's due them as an individual created in God's image, the better off it's going to be, right? So, I think
Mhm.
the big principles are transparency, authenticity, patience, and grace.
Ooh, transparency, authenticity, patience, and grace. Oh, yes,
Because we're
yes.
all going to make mistakes,
Yeah.
all of
Mhm.
us. And for example, my top core value is freedom of thought. I thought it was
Mhm.
freedom, but that's too vague.
Yeah.
And we understand that freedom for you might look very different than freedom for me. But
Mhm.
my top core value is freedom of thought. I literally am a critical thinker. I'm a natural deconstructionist. I use that word even.
Mhm.
It is do not tell me how to think. And my
Mhm.
mother would say, "Don't you love this picture?" And I would say, "Hmm." My first response is usually no, just for the principle of the matter,
Yeah.
because you assumed that I would, agree with you. It wasn't until she was gone that I even realized that this was a thing. But my husband helped me figure it out by saying things like, wouldn't you agree that, and then he would, yeah, you hear it.
Yeah.
And so when I figured this out, when I got to know myself better and said, oh, hang on, how about, let me tell you, this is a core value and freedom of thought is a thing for me. And so now we use the term when he wants to, when he would like some agreement or some conversation, he'll even say, what do you think about this?
Mm.
9 times out of 10, we've been married almost 30 years. I'm gonna think like him anyway.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't agree, but many times we'll come to the same conclusion after talking through something. But for him to just assume that I would agree with him is an automatic no, and I
Yeah.
can't make that stop. And
Yes.
somebody might say, "Well, Andrea, that's immature." And I'm like, "I know, but it's a core value."
Mhm.
It's just how God made me because I question things well.
Mhm.
So, I think those are some principles that I think are very helpful, and we do that with our son as well.
That's so good because what I love about what you're talking about is there's this maturation process that you're describing where you the first step is reaction, right? Of like, I'm
Right.
angry right now. And then there's this uncovering of going, oh, why am I angry? Oh, here's the this is actually of I feel like my core values are being violated. And so now I know to express my core value and then help the other person see like here's where I'm coming from, but you're really what I see you talking about is, like, you're keeping your side of the street clean, as they would say in, like, a 12-step room, right?
Right.
They would like,
Exactly.
I'm owning this as a piece of my identity, and as a result, here is my response, here's my feedback, or here's where, like you talked about with the conflict with your son, here's where I need help from you.
Mhm.
And so I think that's so beautiful because there's this full and I think this is where the whole, I talked earlier about, when people say, "Oh, I'm just keeping it real. I'm just, throwing my junk all over you." There's this, offloading that happens that's an indication of immaturity, of saying,
Right.
"You need to change to align with what I want, or I'm just gonna act however I want without regard to the cost of that." And what you're describing is actually, I know myself. And because I know myself and I know both the pieces of that that are, like, that are obvious to all as being really helpful and fruitful, like critical thinking.
Mhm.
And what can be the shade of that, that if you say no, I'm gonna say yes. If you say yes, I'm gonna say no. And recognizing like that's the flip side of the coin, right?
Yeah.
They one cannot exist without the other, but I can show up in a healthy way and honor that you are different from me
Right.
without, like, stepping on anyone. I think that's so beautiful, and I feel and hopefully those of you who are listening who are kind of wrestling with this idea of, what if me showing up as myself steps all over somebody else? It's only stepping all over somebody else if they have some sort of attachment to you showing up a certain way instead of taking you as you
Mhm.
are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can be authentic in a healthy way, and I love that. That's so I don't think I've really teased that out before, so that's so beautiful.
Well, and one more thing if I could add to that
Yes.
is it when we look at core values, we've not really talked about that in depth yet, and I don't know that we will because we're having such amazing
I
conversation about all
know!
the stuff around it. But a couple of things to notice or to say there is that they are intangible. So they're inside you, they're intangible, but they have documentable effects. Like you can see, like for me, you can see the reaction, right?
Mhm.
But they're inherent, they're your internal compass. They're inspirational, they give you motivation, they bring you joy, they do all those things, but they're already integrated into your life and relationships, which goes to the point that you're making is that if you're in a relationship that doesn't honor a core value, if you have a relationship with someone that doesn't
Mhm.
um, value that in you, and you try to express that, even though you've allowed that to be stepped on and stepped on and stepped on and dishonored, it's time to say, you know what? I want this, but here's the other piece: is that core values are always reciprocal. They're never one way. So you can't have a core value of critical thinking or respect and not want that for another person. It's that
Oh,
important for you.
wow. Okay.
Okay. So when we talk about core values, we're talking about things that are non-negotiables in your life and business. And these are the ways you measure success. These are the things that kind of whether or not you think they've affected every decision you've ever made. And
Mm.
either you've honored them or you've not honored them. And so when I say they're reciprocal, they're always that way. And so even when I teach, it's like I don't always give the answer, right? Podcast interviews are different because I'm giving answers. But when I teach Sunday school every Sunday morning. And so when I teach, it's almost rabbinical in style. It's like, so what do you see in this passage? So what do you think about this? So what came up for you? And when I go to, sometimes I have to teach a combined class with a senior adult or a co-ed adult class. They're not used to that kind of teaching. My ladies class is used to that, but they're not used to it. And it takes them a minute. And I just sit there and wait because I want you to think, because it's that important, because I know what that'll do for you. I know that you interacting with the word is going to do that. So that's a practical way that it comes out. But if respect or authenticity or belonging, it's like, I want you to belong as much as I want to belong. So why would I do anything that would hinder that? Right.
Yeah.
So that's how you know if showing up as yourself is not usually going to harm people.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Right?
Okay.
Boom.
Yeah.
Showing
Yeah.
up as yourself, if you're truly showing up with your core values, you're showing up in a way that is going to benefit other people. As it's the definition of the golden rule. It's the definition of what John Maxwell calls the platinum rule. It's don't just do unto others as you want done unto you. It's do unto others as they want done unto them. It's like when you're showing up in fully honoring your core values, you have the space and the boundaries and the freedom to actually do those things for other people in ways that honor their core values, because you don't feel like you have to protect yours because you know who you are. So there's a freedom that comes with that too. So
Hey, Mama, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you gave yourself some white space? I am not talking about a trip to the bathroom alone or even the grocery store. When's the last time you had what I like to call some no one needs me time? For homeschooling entrepreneurs, time like this isn't a luxury. It's actually a key component to a healthy business, homeschool, and family life. So, if you're ready for your next respite, whether it's you by yourself, you and your spouse, or a family trip, join us at our peaceful haven, just like paradise, located on gorgeous Oak Island, North Carolina. This 3-bedroom house is just a short walk to the ocean and nearby restaurants. It has a screened-in back porch with fireplace that is to die for, hot tub, and even a fire pit if you're feeling ambitious. Book through the link in the show notes, and then you have a unique discount code, podcast100, to get a $100 discount on your stay as a thank you for being one of my listeners. Get your next getaway on the calendar today. Okay, so here's where I am. I want to put a quick underline on your free deliverable, which is going to help people unpack. So listen, we're going to link this in the show notes. Scroll down, sign up. Like this, literally, what Andrea's provided is going to help you unpack what your core values are. And then you can connect with her. She's got courses, she's got all kinds of amazing assets. So I want to make sure to underline that now because we're talking about it, but I don't want to go too deep into it. Even I want to go too deep into it, but I want to make sure that we hit this next piece because what you said pulls it together so beautifully. Talk to me about raising children, recognizing that they have different core values than we do. How do we know? How do we help them unpack what their core values are? How do we parent them when they're little and we really don't know and we don't have a way? It's like all pre-verbal or pre-critical thinking. How do we do this? How do we build a family structure that encourages each member to show up fully and uniquely themselves?
you saved the hardest question for last.
I know, but we're not done. I'm sure there's gonna be some follow-ups on this because I know it's gonna be so good.
Well, I'm just gonna be transparent and honest. I wish I had known this stuff when I was younger. I wish I had known this stuff when my son was 2. I wish I had understood all of those things. He's adopted, like I said. So we didn't understand that ADHD was a thing for him. We didn't know how to parent ADHD. We didn't know any of those things. And I didn't really know who I was. So it wasn't until like the last 7 years, I feel like I've had to do repair work. I've had to figure things out. But here's what I would for sure say, knowing full well that core values are present. I believe core values are present when we're born. I think that's how God wires us. It's the things that are important to us. For me, the critical thinking or the freedom of thought showed up in my mother said, you are the definition of the strong-willed child, Andrea. I could not tell you what to do. And I'm like looking back going, yeah, that's because you were trying to tell me what to do or trying to tell me what to think. And, as children, you start out very black and white, very, You don't do abstract, you don't do nuance. And it may very well be that just watching what brings your child joy is a really good way to do it. The other piece that I use, and I layer these, and that's how I talk about it, is I layer core values work with disc work, because disc is communication wiring and core values is really more like motivation wiring. And so when I have another free download that I think you've got. It's a cheat sheet that you can actually look at in your kids and see, well, maybe they've got these kinds of characteristics that show me how they communicate. And if they are a specific disc type, then they are going to show up with other pieces that are similar in core values. But what I say is there's flags. There's always little flags that are going to pop up and say, oh, this might be a core value, or this might be a core value. We also did, my family did, I think it's called, what is your where's your flag, or what's your country? I forget exactly what it's called. Maybe I'll give it to you afterwards and you can link it if it's still available. But it's this little game that helps you figure out what country you're from. I think it's Tim Challies maybe that put it out. And so when we did this, my son was like 5 or 6, and he's like from Fun Country, and he's from Peace Country, and Fun Country is his next one. And so looking back at those kinds of things, it's like, I will be shocked if we get to a place where my son is an adult and peace or peacefulness or some kind of harmony or shalom or whatever is not a core value for him. Because looking back, I was shocker. I'm a yeller. And I am known for slamming doors. I ain't perfect, y'all. I mean, but I am very expressive. I grew up in an Asian culture where it seems like it's going to be very like, but it's not. It's like Koreans are I grew up in Seoul, Korea. Koreans are very, very expressive. And so that seemed kind of normal. And so when I get frustrated, I yell, or my voice goes, or I get a really demonstrative tone. So when I would even just raise my tone, he would react in a very strong way. And I just thought he was belligerent, or, we want to think those things. It's like, I'm born in 66, right? So I'm like, children are seen and not heard.
Yes.
Children do what their parents tell them to do. And it's like, all of a sudden at 42, I've got a brand new baby. And at 43, he's like starting to express himself, and that's not how it's going to work. And so looking back now, I can see all of that stuff, all of the yelling, it like makes him shut down immediately. And so now it still does. And instead of yelling, I'll look at him and say, how can I say this to you? Because now we got high school, and it's like we just finished the first year of high school and we got homework. How can I say this to you in a way that you are going to respond favorably? And he'll say, well, if you say this, right? So the older they get, you can start asking them, but it shows me too, all those little sparks or flags that I saw along the way are indicators of what his core values might be. The other piece is we did do a DISC assessment on him as a child, and we do have a student report. You can start them as young as 10, but then we also did another one on him it's called college and career, or student career or something. And it's like a longer report than we get for adults. It's got what their values might be. It's got their learning style in it. It's got 2 pages, single space, 4 columns worth of ideas for careers for their personality type. And it turns out he is a very high C, which is a creative, which shocker, he's in there designing Lego cars right now.
Yeah.
Creative, compliant, but it just is very layers perfectly to say he likes peace, he likes conformity, he likes things to be kind of just so. And me honoring that in him helps him become who he can be. Why would I want to fight with my kid to make him something that he's not ever going to be? I mean, we joke about not wanting to be the reason our kids have therapy. Well, this is how you cannot be the reason your kids have to go to therapy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, and so I want every homeschool mom that's listening is on the edge of their seats to find out how they can connect with this tool that you just talked about. How can we know our kids? So, okay, so there's the and tell me again what the core values point to, your
I think they point more to your motivation.
motivation. Okay.
They point to the things. I'm literally coming up with this new, because I'm learning how to talk about these kinds of things. And I've been layering core values with DISC, but DISC is your communication wiring, and
Mhm.
it's communication and leadership. Core values is much more foundational. It's like elemental, like a periodic chart. Think of it like all those elements that you build on, that's what your core values are. So
Okay.
everything else builds on top of that. So I say they're almost more motivational
Okay.
than communication, which is DISC.
Would in my mind, I keep thinking the word identity. Would you call it identity? Like that it's kind of like this is who you are, or would you say there's something higher even than the core values?
I think identity is made up of a lot of things.
Okay.
And if you want to get super spiritual, identity is like just being made imago Dei, just being
Yeah.
made in God's image.
Mhm.
Um, I think core values this is why I like having these conversations
I
because it's
know.
making me actually do that better and be a little bit more articulate because the other thing is this is not proprietary information. I didn't come up with this. This is something that a lot of people are working on. Brene Brown is famous for working with core values,
Mhm.
but and these are also internal. They're not external.
Yeah.
So they're not something that we can program into our kids. They're not something that we can choose to have. They are things that we already have. So maybe identity is a good word. I feel like identity is a bigger word
That makes
than,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like identity is more than just that. But I think it could be almost like DNA, maybe kind of like
Yeah.
your
Okay.
personality DNA, like
Mhm.
because they literally are the things that when somebody messes with you in this area, it's like you're gonna take them down.
Yes.
Unless you've been trained not to, which
Mhm.
by the time we're adults, there are many times we've been trained not to
Mhm.
react to our core values being honored, especially if they're not in harmony with our environment and the things that are going on around us.
Yeah. Now, okay, really briefly, I know you've mentioned DISC a few times. I know DISC, but for my folks that don't, what is that?
DISC is a personality type behavior indicator. I mean, it's a wonderful, quick little assessment that you can take that plots out on an XY axis. If you've heard of all the way back to Hippocrates, the four humors, it's the old fashioned red, yellow, green, and blue quadrants. So if you're homeschool moms, you better know this. This is math, right? A little bit of math. On your quadrants, you've got your y-axis, which is you plot out on two different spectrums. So you plot out on the
Mhm.
outgoing to reserved, and you plot out the x-axis is people-oriented versus task-oriented.
Mhm.
And so when you do this assessment, you're going to plot out somewhere in these quadrants. The top left quadrant, the reason why it's called DISC is that's the Ds. That's your dominance. There's about 3% of the population. The top right quadrant and the disc, I mean, the Ds are both extroverted, they're outgoing, and they're task oriented.
Mhm.
And then your top right quadrant is your eyes, which you and I both fall into that quadrant
Yes, we
top.
do. Mhm.
These are your people and extroverted, they're people oriented and outgoing. So they're much more likely to tell a story, which sometimes it's hard to get me to stop talking.
Same.
They're usually pretty gregarious and they're fun to be around, but they're about 11% of the population. Going around to the bottom right quadrant, these are your steadies. These are people oriented and yet reserved. These are
Mhm.
about 69% of the population. These are the people that hold up your change curve. They want everything to be the same.
Mhm.
And this is why we have teams. They're very team oriented, but they're also very loyal, and they'll be loyal to an idea as well as a person. And
Mhm.
then I mentioned before, my son is a C. My husband and my son are both high Cs. And it's my second letter, which is interesting. But the
Mhm.
bottom left quadrant, these are reserved and task oriented. So these are people who are really good with numbers, really good with details. Like I said, my son's upstairs designing Lego cars. He has like the McLaren thing that he took apart and decided he didn't want it orange. So he like found all the different parts and he could put it back together with all
Oh.
black parts from all the other different things that he had from like Star Wars and everything. So when we understand the patterns with which people communicate, we can see where they fall. And nobody's in one quadrant. We're all a little
Mhm.
bit of all of them, but we express them in it to a certain extent. So when you can see that somebody needs a lot of detail, you can give it to them. When you can see they need the bottom line, like a D, they're just very results oriented. Then you can just give them the too long didn't read, right? And
Mhm.
if it's somebody who's an S, you can see, okay, no wonder they're pushing back. I'm trying to push change here. And they're like, but there's nothing wrong. It's not broken. So when you can see these patterns in all of your family, it really can make a difference with a little a little presentation that we do called Family Stress to Family Best. And it's like walking through DISC with the whole family to just kind of show with the parents and with the kids, when you understand and recognize other people's patterns of their need for communication and belonging, then you can actually make changes to do that in a way that is productive.
Oh, okay. I love this so much, and what keeps coming back to me as I'm hearing you talking is, like, this is a path to loving well.
Yes.
We know who we are, we know who the people in our circle are, and we can look at them and go, "Okay, this one needs a lot of detail. This one needs a lot of this one needs a lot of support and encouragement." Like my oldest daughter, whenever there's a change I'm gonna make, and she's got to be an S, she's just got to be. When there's a change that I'm gonna make, she and I go out together first because I'm an I, so we're always making changes in this house. And so she and I go out together first, and I say, "I just want to preview something for you."
Oh,
And
smart. Yeah.
and I'll tell her and I'll get her buy-in and she can ask questions or whatever it is. But I wanna put just a note on this for my mamas out there. You're probably already doing some of these things
Hmm.
without having the roadmap. You
Yeah.
figured it out, right?
Yes.
But what you give that I love, Andrea, and it's why I wanted to bring you on, is you give us the language and the tools to go, "Oh," like, even hearing you speak at that class that we first connected in, I felt like I came to understand my husband probably has a lot more S than I realized because everything's always fine for him. "We're good. What do you mean? What do you mean do something different? We're good right now," and
Hmm.
so loyal and so devoted, but I'd always thought he must be a D because he's also one to say, "Well, that's stupid," and just kind of move on. "Here's what we're doing," and lead the people, right? And so now I'm not 100% sure what he is, but even just knowing, oh, there might be more than I understood before, and this will help me understand him better.
Hmm.
So help let bring this home for my people. They are intentional parents. They are intentional spouses. They want to love well. So what do you offer as far as understanding core values, understanding your disc type, understanding how this all works together in a family system? How could they connect with you? How could they work with you? And what types of things do you offer?
Well, individually, I mean, I work corporately with teams. So if you have a business where you have teams and you want to do this there, I can work with you there. And I love coming in and giving DISC assessments and actually helping people see exactly where they plot out and exactly how they can make some changes immediately to actually speak better and communicate better and build bridges. And like I said, I had to do some repair work. Even the other day, I was talking to my son. I said, "We've got your disc report. We need to go through that this summer." And he's like, "Yeah, I might need a copy. No problem. I got you." But as far as working with me, starting with yourself is one of the best places to do that. And if you wanted to start with core values, I have my main framework I call magnetic leadership, and that's three main pieces. It's understanding you, which is your core values. It's understanding how you communicate, which is your disc. And it's then understanding how you're going to live that out. And I have a life philosophy of 6 tenets of what I call intentional optimism.
I
So
love that.
if you are an intentional mama, if you're an intentional doing anything intentionally, these principles could work for you. And it's a place to start to live out. It's like how we do what we do. So on my website, you mentioned a minute ago the free download. Right above my head is a button that says free core values exercise. If you're interested in something a little deeper, I do have a core values course. I do have one-on-one coaching that I'm offering for that. You'll need to contact me for that. It's not quite up on the website yet because it's been in alpha testing, and I think it's almost ready to be completely launched, but I've already got clients that are working out really well.
Love it.
Disc is definitely up on the website. And if you wanted to do one with your family, we can do children as young as 10. And if not, I have a free disc cheat sheet download that pulls a couple of pieces out of a main report that gives you an idea of what it looks like in your family with adults and with your children. And every time I share that in a workshop, I like put a QR code up and people are like holding out their phones like, "Oh, tell
Yes.
me about my kids."
Yes.
And it's really enlightening to be able to see. But I will tell you, there are tendencies in children that we're not going to see fully play out because my son showed up as a D on the child one, but showed up as a I think, on the student one, and anytime you're 3 letters above the line, you can show up sometimes as a D because people think I show
Mm.
up as a D sometimes. So, working with me can be as simple as listening to my podcast. It can be as simple as, inviting me in to do a workshop, or if you have a membership program, like I that's how you and I met. We could also put something together for your community. We could do the family stress to family best if you like. There's all kinds of ways to work with me, and you can just email me straight at andrea@theintentionaloptimist.com. I get those emails. You can DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn and tell me that you heard us have this conversation here on She Considers a Field, and I'll know that you're not spamming me, and I will be happy to respond. I would love to have conversations about this.
I love that. Well, Andrea, any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything that you want to share with my people?
I think that the work that if you're doing entrepreneurship and homeschooling, clearly you are already on the path to doing something different. You're already outside of the accepted norm, and this is the opportunity to, like you said, to love well, to do it in a way that truly impacts the future. There is a beauty to understanding how we can impact future generations, and this is how we can do it. We can impact future generations by impacting the generations in our homes and the generations that are right around us. So I think it's important, and you owe it to everybody else, not just you, to do the work for yourself and to think for yourself. That critical thinking piece, it's always going to be at the top of my list.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Andrea, thank you so much. I know my people will be so excited to connect with you going forward, and I just cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It is my privilege.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of She Considers a Field. If you found value in this episode, I would be so grateful if you would leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and be sure to share with a friend who needs some encouragement on her journey today too. Until next time, remember, you've got this because he's got you.